And there are various ways of doing that. One is we could raise taxes on people. That's not the way. Corporations are people, my friend. We can raise taxes on. Of course they are. Everything corporations earn ultimately goes to people. So, where do you think it goes? What? Whose pockets? Whose pockets?
With the New York Times expose on Donald Trump's taxes finally coming out just a couple weeks ago, we got to see a lot of the ways that Trump and other billionaires and corporations, work the system to avoid paying taxes. In the recent article, "As the Global Hegemon Collapses, Can Private Property Be Left Behind?" written by Steve Miller, which I will link below this video, Steve goes into something that's really not covered, but should be. We have Steve here to talk with us about that. Hey, welcome, Steve.
Thank you. First of all, these tax issues coming out reveal certainly that they've had his taxes for years and years. That this is the surveillance society. You know they got that stuff. But more importantly, it's beginning to show in a period of real political crisis in the United States that corporations operate on a whole different level than ordinary human beings and certainly take advantage of the situation. So one example of this is what's called depreciation. If I buy a house as an individual, I cannot depreciate that house. But if I am a landlord and I rent the house, I can depreciate the house for use that it supposedly declines, the value declines over the years. Interestingly enough, those of us who pay rent understand fully well that we keep paying more and more rent. So it's actually appreciating, which is the job of local government in the United States. But with depreciation, this is a figment. How come somebody who buys a house can't do that, but a business can do that? And so what we have here is a legal figment, a legally created privilege that says that if you have business property, you can depreciate that property from your taxes. So what an incredible deal. What Donald Trump does, and he's in the advance of some of these guys on this one, is he then gets a phony appraisal. And the appraisal says, oh no, you bought the golf course for $10 million, but it's actually worth $30 million. So then he depreciates that automatically off of his taxes. It's an incredible situation. It's just a game. They have thousands of these things to protect private property. We all know that after the Citizens United decision in the United States that money is speech, and that private property is votes. That's the way it's configured here. So let's look at what happened after the collapse of the economy in 2008. The first thing that happened was that all of the real estate people and the financiers who supported them said, damn, I don't think these people are ever going to be able to afford houses again. And actually they can. So they proclaimed a rentership society. Now in the United States, we have massive corporations that own maybe 30,000 different rental houses, and they depreciate every one of them. But you, the renter, you used to own it. In fact, they threatened to kick you out, but now you, the renter, have to pay rent on this stuff. And these guys just take the money off. So the evolution is what we see here in Oakland, in Hong Kong, in British Columbia. And that is that you have the financial interests, the financial capitalists speculating in housing, and they build houses. We have tons of high rises here in Oakland, while we have one homeless camp per square mile. That's 90 homeless camps, and it's growing every day. And yet these guys can depreciate this housing. So this is what it becomes as a mechanism for just stashing your capital. And that's really what they do with it. They build housing that's supposed to be empty, that doesn't have human beings in it. We have here in Oakland with all these camps, we have 4 empty properties for empty houses for every single person who's homeless. I mean, it's insane.
Now, in the article, you make a distinction between, and even what you just said, between the private property of just like a regular homeowner and the private property being held by these giant corporations. So, what is the difference between those forms of private property?
Very important. Personal property is the stuff that you use every day, your car, your house, where you live, whatever your sink. That's personal property. That's not what private property is. Private property is a legal creation that establishes forms of ownership over what we use every day: the roads, the water, the food, the environment. I mean, this is all controlled by private property owned by corporations. That's the form it takes. And these guys are not talking about helping out people who are individuals. These guys are talking about creating ever more privileges for themselves in order to privatize what the public has.
Hmm. And you also talked about how the U.S. COVID response was not really just bad and inept, but that it was actually sort of being handed over to these same forces of private property. Can you explain how we saw that in the U.S.?
Oh, it's astounding. In Europe, for example, most countries paid the whatever business you work for to pay you your salary about at the 80% level. And so the government funded the businesses even though it was closed, even though you didn't do any work, even though you were at home, you got 80% of your salary. And then they had bonuses on top of that. That's not what happened here. Here we got a chicken feed little $1,200 thingy, and the corporations run everything. I mean, Trump is absolutely open about this, that the federal government will not help out. We've learned the hard way here that they could mobilize all the resources. They could make sure that everybody had PPEs and masks and the basic things, but instead they're going the opposite direction to politicize even the issue of wearing masks and talking about things like herd immunity, which is really genocide. And so the corporations handle everything through the market. The government holds its hands back. It will not coordinate things, and states compete against each other for the PPEs. The price goes up. I mean, it's lunacy. We could do this, but we're not doing this.
And even with all of these different government departments like the CDC and the FDA and all of the different governors competing against each other, and really a lot of different parts of the federal government sort of fighting with themselves, with the backdrop of the presidential election of the Democrats versus the Republicans and all that kind of infighting in Congress. What does this mean when the entire government seems to be fighting itself?
Well, it's an amazing thing. I mean, we have the the FBI coming out and talking about right wing militias as terrorists. Meanwhile, we have the president supporting the right wing militias. We have the post office being used to curtail the vote. And we have massive numbers now, people coming out to vote, sometimes standing in line for 11 or 12 hours. I mean, it's insanity. You have every aspect of the federal government has been turned into a campaign uh, function for Trump. And there's serious debate within the capitalist class, within the people who rule this country, over how we handle stuff. Donald Trump has no problem with shooting people down on the streets. On the other hand, we have the Democrats who have a little more nuanced approach where they say, oh, yeah, we're all in the big tent, come on, but we can only proceed little by little, piecemeal, step by step, one little thing at a time. And that's not the reality that people face here anymore. So both of these parties agree on almost everything, probably 85% of everything. And yet, nobody has a plan. I mean, neither party can figure out how to help some 50 million people who are became homeless or I'm sorry, became without health care during this crisis, and many of them are heading towards homelessness. I mean, we're looking at a situation where people themselves are raising serious programmatic issues. And that's what's going to carry forward throughout the craziness after the election.
So, yeah, speaking of that, like whether Biden wins or if Trump somehow wins or retains power, I mean, what are some of those kind of programmatic things that we need to be fighting for against the Democrats or the Republicans? What would that look like?
Either way, people need basic needs. People need to be able to eat. People need health care, which we don't have. People need education. They need to be able to contribute to society. They need a place to live. And all of this is up for debate now. It comes down at very basic levels. I mean, we had the UN come to Oakland a couple of years ago and say that these homeless camps were deliberately cruel. In other words, the policy could be done different to help these people out, but it was cruel. I mean, this is the kind of thing we're facing all over the country, and both the Democrats and the Republicans agree with this stuff. What the issue is, how are we going to get our basic needs? And that's a practical issue that all of us need to talk about in these times.
Yeah, I would invite anyone to read the full article linked below. And thanks a lot, Steve.
Thank you. Thank you very much.